All right, so today we got to start by talking about the craziness that's going on in Ontario. The Doug Ford government just announced yesterday, um, 10,000 up to $100,000 for individuals, possible jail, 10,000 up to 50,000 for a director, officer of a corporation, 10,000 to upwards of 10 million for a corporation. So those are the laws for breaking the indoor-outdoor social gathering rules. And this is just absolute insanity that's going on right now. And I've been bringing up for a while now that I think people are at least people in the community of people that are actually awake to the fact that this is pretty much a complete and utter scam, that people are getting a little bit complacent in that people think, oh yeah, the lockdowns are done and over with. We're all, it's all clear skies from, from now on, but it really isn't. I mean, the cases have gone up. I've heard conflicting reports as well that Ontario is planning to re-lock down. And I mean, their cases have been up lately. But the other thing to point out too, like I've been saying for months now, is that the hospitalization numbers aren't up. I think there's only what, like 15 people in the ICU. So um, the like I say, the hospitalization numbers are not up. I mean, it's the same thing for Alberta. The actual cases are up, but the hospitalizations aren't. Like those numbers are pretty steady. So that is just more and more evidence that the government is just panicking over this. And the problem really is that whenever it comes to things like this, it's always the most paranoid people that get their way, right? Like it's a combination of paranoia and groupthink, I think, because I mean the people that are worried, the people that were worried about, the religious cult types, like, yeah, they're very paranoid, but there's a very small amount of them. The problem with this is that we combine paranoia with groupthink, right? And that you have a massive group of people that think that this is the doomsday virus and all the craziness that goes along with that. And this is the big problem. Like these places, I mean, it's looking like Ontario may re-lock down. And I mean, the other thing to point out too is that, I mean, Doug Ford is a conservative, and this is the other thing too. I really can't stand about people. Oh, you're just biased. No, I really could care less. I've been very hard on Doug Ford throughout this entire situation in his government, fairly hard on the Kenney government. I mean, when it comes to Alberta, too, we have our own craziness to deal with in that we have a government that said, oh no, we're not going to make vaccines mandatory, but yet they have Bill 10 or whatever bill it is that I believe makes that possible for them to make it mandatory. So we have the whatever Shandro is, health minister or whatever his position is, saying, oh no, no, we're not going to make it mandatory. So again, I mean, the one thing that I do, I'm not sure exactly what to think of this. I do always lean on the side of don't trust the government. But the one thing that I do know when it comes to this kind of stuff is that don't trust the government, right? Like they've been proven wrong over and over again throughout this entire situation. I mean, when this whole situation first came to pass in like January, February, March, the government underreacted to this, right? Like they called you, oh, you're a racist if you want to close the borders, and um, comparing it to the flu back then was considered crazy. And then now, back then also is, oh, there's no human to human transmission. People just blindly trusted China. And now, rather than meeting in the middle, we went from this is a complete non-issue to we have to lock down society or we're all going to die kind of thing. And the reality is that it's somewhere in the middle, and it's clearly closer to where off the start, to where it's not something we should be overly worried about. But we should have closed our borders. We should have taken it a little more seriously. But that doesn't mean we need to lock down, from now until eternity. It's just pure insanity that's going on, and I don't want to know what's going to happen because, I mean, the other thing to point out, I know there's a bunch of stuff I'm bringing up, but I don't believe these numbers. I mean, these tests have already been shown to have an alarmingly high amount of false positives. There's a lot of people that are testing positive multiple times. There's a lot of shenanigans going on, to say the least. So when people see, oh, there's X number of new cases, you really have to take that with a grain of salt, because you don't know what the exact number is. And the one thing we do know is that the exact number is not as high as what they say it is. There's a lot of false positives, not to mention too, there's a lot of people that have it that aren't getting tested, right? So we have no idea what the exact number is. But again, the things we do know is that the goal should be to reach herd immunity, right? The goal should be to reach herd immunity while shielding the people that are actually at risk. And not to mention, too, that is exactly what the entirety of the scientific knowledge when it comes to viruses has been, literally for decades. Like literally for decades, we've completely flipped on a dime with no evidence to back it up too, right? Like the only evidence people provide to back it up is simply, pointing out some random correlation and assuming that we can draw causation off it, even though there's plenty of contradictory information, right? Like their reasoning for having the whole mask mandates is they point to a handful of areas that had them and reduce the cases, but yet they completely ignore the fact that there's plenty of areas that didn't have mask mandates that turned out perfectly fine, right? So it's just pure insanity that's going on. And I mean, other people are talking about too, oh yeah, the economy's back on track. I really don't think it is. I think in the States it's a little bit better because the states have more autonomy. I think there's some states that are, the Californias and New Yorks that are in for a world of hurt going forward. And I think there's the more rural, right-leaning ones that are actually doing pretty good. But in Canada, pretty much every province is in trouble, specifically the bigger ones, right? Like Alberta's in a ton of trouble. BC's in some trouble. Ontario's in some trouble. Quebec as well. But that's something that people need to be really worried about. Like we shouldn't be worried about this. The main goal, the biggest thing in the news right now should be how in the world are we going to get the economy back on track? And by the economy, I don't mean the stock market. I mean, how are we going to get unemployment back down to 5% or below, preferably? Which I don't know if the Trudeau government ever got it below 5. I think they got it down to about 5.5 at one point, but that should be the main goal. But it isn't. The main goal is how are we going to lock down again? How can we impose more draconian this and draconian that and all this garbage that the government is worried about? And people should be so up in arms about it, but they're not, because most people are just insane these days, it seems. So this is from Blacklock's reporter. They just put out this morning, not saying Justin Trudeau were forced to snap election, but Elections Canada just ordered 16 million ballot pencils. So yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't know. I mean, if I had to guess, I don't think they would. I don't think the NDP wants an election, but I mean, I think the Conservatives do, and if the Liberals do, well, then that's obviously more than enough. But I don't think that I mean, it's the NDP that really doesn't want it. So either the Liberals have to want it or the NDP has to want it, right? Because you need a majority. So the Conservatives, I assume, want it. Um, I don't know about the Bloc, but I mean, the Bloc don't really matter. The Greens don't matter. It's really, do the Liberals want it? Because we know the Conservatives want it. So if the Liberals want it, it's a go. Or if the NDP wants it, it's a go, because the Conservatives will support that, obviously. So, but again, I don't know if they really want it right now. Like, I mean, Justin Trudeau's support is all over the map. I see polls that show that him and the Conservatives are neck and neck. I see polls that show he's gained support since this whole scandal. Like, I really don't know what to think. If I had to guess, and if an election was held a month from now, assuming there's no, massive shocking stories that could change people's minds, which I don't even know if that would anyway, I still think the Liberals would win. Probably not a majority, but I still think they would win because, again, the Conservatives, they're just doubling down on their failures of the last election. But given the fact that the Liberals are so weak right now, I still think that they would win. But again, if the Conservatives ran a decent platform, this is the other thing too, that I don't even know if it's possible for the Conservatives to win right now. I mean, the Maxime Berniers of the world point out that if they actually had some integrity, that they might win. I don't know about that. Now, I don't know what his official position on it is, but the point being is that I don't know if there's anything that Conservatives can do to win at this point. Like, I really don't. Like, if they actually stayed true to actual conservative principle, which would probably get me to vote for them, I don't know if they would win because they would sacrifice parts of the GTA. But if they keep going, further and further to the left, they're slowly losing support from the West. But last election, again, they had almost universal support from the West. But now that there's a Wexit party, now that I think people tried the just blindly vote conservative, I don't know. I think more people are going to turn away from them because I think people know that if you're going to lose anyway, you might as well do it with some integrity. Like a lot of people are sacrificing their actual beliefs just to try and get Justin Trudeau out. But if the conservatives keep going further and further to the left to try and pander to the middle, which again, the vast majority of those people aren't going to vote for them anyway. I don't think it, like I say, I don't think it's going to work. If I was the conservatives, I would go back to being actually principled, be like, yeah, we're going to balance the budget within 3 years and actually be serious about it, not like Justin Trudeau. Be like, yeah, well, we're in a deficit for 1 or 2 years max. We'll have the budget balanced. And I would say by the end of like by 5 years, you should be running a surplus, right? Like you should be running a surplus. But that's not going to happen, right? That's not going to happen because, again, the only way that they can garner enough support is to pander to the middle and basically be, in an effect, liberals of like a decade or two ago, right? Like the difference between the liberals 20 years ago and the conservatives now, it's next to nothing, right? If you talk to the average far leftist, yeah, they'll vehemently deny that. But if you look on an actual political compass map, there's not much difference. Like there's not much difference whatsoever. So anyway, will they force an election? I still lean towards no, but you never know. I mean, for all we know, there'll be another massive scandal coming out of this. But again, I don't know if that's enough. Like I don't know if there's literally anything Justin Trudeau and the Liberals can do at this point to convince enough people to vote against them. Like I literally don't know if there is, and that's very sad to think of. But I think it's a sad reality nonetheless. This is from Mark Levin. He says Fauci says he takes vitamin C and D. He says they boost immunity. Funny how he waited 8 months to mention it. Now, again, the fact that the mainstream media and all these supposed, medical experts aren't, talking about this more just goes to show that they don't have good intentions, right? They don't have good intentions. One of the biggest things coming from this whole thing is how can we boost people's immunity? Because we know there's no debate on this. We know that people that have very strong immune systems and people that have no comorbidities, the virus literally poses no risk to them. It's literally less than 0.1% chance of killing them. I think the numbers now are around like 1 in 10,000. Exactly what I was saying in like May. Again, that before this is all said and done, the death rate's going to be less than the flu, or at the very least comparable to the flu for the vast majority of people. We've already known that. The numbers are already very clear on that. And the fact that this isn't a bigger story, this isn't talked about more, just goes to show that people really don't care about you. They only want power, they only want control, and they'll do whatever it takes to to do that basically. So yeah, again, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nutritionist, so obviously, do your own research. But in my opinion, you should absolutely be taking vitamin C and D, especially in the wintertime, right? Like especially in the wintertime, especially in Canada. Like probably the vast majority of people in Canada are deficient in vitamin D in the wintertime. In fact, I would say probably almost everyone, unless you're supplementing it. But again, I'm no expert, but I mean, it's rather obvious at this point. You don't need to be an expert to know that boosting your immunity is very valuable, especially in the wintertime. And the last thing I wanted to bring up is from Paul Mitchell, and he says Australia has become a medical police state, and now health officials are facing blowback. Official now needs police protection. Now, as much as I hate to see stuff like this, I mean, eventually there comes a point to where I lose sympathy for these people. Like, I wish no ill will on anyone, but again, there comes a point to where it's like, yeah, you kind of had your chance. Like, I mean, if Hitler was killed, I mean, I don't. This person, I'm not saying they're gonna turn out like Nazi Germany or any of that kind of stuff. No. But again, like if he was killed in the early days of the you know what, you probably wouldn't have been too sad about it, right? And it's the same stuff here. And like I said, I'm not saying they're on the same scale, but they are comparable in that they are literally a police state right now, in that you cannot go out unless you get government, government approval. They have, what is it, like 23-hour a day lockdowns. They have absolute and utterly draconian lockdowns going on, and they don't even have a massive amount of cases. Like again, I don't care how many cases you have. I don't care if 50% of the population hasn't is active for the virus. This stuff should not be happening. This stuff should not be happening. It's absolute insanity, and it needs to be called out. Like, it needs to be called out. And these politicians, the problem is that they've gotten so used to just being able to do whatever they want with no blowback that eventually, people get mad enough that they just can't take it anymore. And I think that's what's happening now in Australia. I mean, they're arresting people for Facebook posts. Like, for God's sake, like, just how insane do things have to get before people, get up in arms? Like, I really don't get it. And that's the problem too, is that all hell's going to break loose at some point if they keep going down the road they're going. Like, it's absolute insanity. So anyway, I mean, like I say, insanity. You got, Ontario, you got in Australia, pretty much everywhere. I mean, there is plenty of areas that have, largely ignored this and done very well. Sweden, South Dakota, areas like that. I mean, most of the third world as well. But again, this stuff should not be going on under any circumstances. So anyway, if you liked the video, make sure you hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure you follow me on Twitter, BitChute, and Parler. All those links are in the description, so you can find them all there.